One of the world's greatest drummers of all time, well known for his unique and experimental playing style, goes by the name of Neil Peart. Neil Peart was born in Hamilton, Ontario, and grew up in a small town known as Port Dalhousie. It was a quiet neighborhood of a town with a small downtown shopping square and dining scene, somewhere unassuming that would become the hometown of someone who would become a famous rock star one day. He grew up in a small house and was the first child of 4. His siblings were his brother Danny and his sisters Judy and Nancy. Peart skipped 2 grades in elementary school and began high school at age 12. Growing up, it was clear that Neil was born a drummer. He would drum on dressers and counters around the house with chopsticks, so his parents bought him a pair of drumsticks for his 13th birthday, some lessons, a practice drum, and promised him that if he stuck with practicing for a year, that they'd buy him a drum set. As it turns out, Peart stuck with it. His parents bought him a small drum set for his 14th birthday. As time went on, he began taking drum set lessons with the legendary drum set player who went by the name of Don George. He was a well-known drum set player for over 40 years. This is when Peart began to recognize his passion for playing drums. His first performance took place on the stage of his high school, Lakeport High School, at the Christmas band concert where he had a great big drum solo. From then on, Peart attempted to join many community bands in the Ontario area. From this point on, Peart really struggled to make a living. At only 18 years old, Peart traveled to London in hopes to further his career in music. Despite playing for several bands there, he had to support himself through working at a jewelry shop called Great Frog on Carnberry Street. While he was still traveling and finding himself in London, Peart became fascinated by the writings of a woman named Ayn Rand. Her writings began to hold a significant influence on his philosophical beliefs. Neil Peart began writing song lyrics in addition to drumming, and many of them were influenced by Ayn Rand. Later on, Neil returned to Canada and was recruited to drum for the band Hush. Shortly after this, one of Peart's friends convinced him that he should audition to join the band Rush, who needed a replacement for their original drummer. He walked into the audition timidly, and the band members did not take him seriously. Geddy Lee, the lead singer, described Peart as a really tall, lanky guy with really short hair. The other members did not think he was cool enough to join their band. He showed up in gym shorts in his old beat-up car with his drums stored in trash cans. He began playing, and Lee describes, "Suddenly he's playing all these triplets with his feet. You'd know in 30 seconds this isn't a normal drummer here." Peart was not expecting to make the cut. 2 weeks later, he was accepted into Rush. With Peart's skill and the performance quality of his bandmates Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, Rush rapidly became one of the most successful rock bands. They won a total of 24 gold and 14 platinum records, 3 multi-platinum records, meaning that the band is only 3rd in popularity among the rock bands the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. In 1981, Peart wrote what will later be known as Rush's most famous song, Tom Sawyer. This song is notorious for its 7/8 time signature and difficult, tedious drum fills. Near the end of the song, there's an amazing drum solo. This became known as Rush's most mainstream song, but many consider that it is a classic for a good reason. Neil Peart began getting very busy when Rush started going on world tours. The band once played 140 shows in a single year. In his book, Far and Near, Neil Peart described his experiences traveling and the beautiful scenery as he rode his motorcycle through several different countries. Some of these countries included England, Scotland, North America, Canada, and Mexico. Later on in the book, Peart describes that it is extremely difficult to be on tour so often, mainly because of the separation it created in his family. His wife would grow frustrated with him for being away so long, and his daughter was constantly missing her father being away from home. He cared deeply for his wife and daughter, Jacqueline and Selena Taylor, which is why Peart was heartbroken and shattered when his daughter tragically died at the age of 19 in a car accident. Horrifically, his wife died just under a year later from cancer on June 10, 1998. Before the passing of his wife and daughter, Peart was said to have been the life of the party. Among all of his band members, Neil Peart was known as the interview guy and was always open to answering any questions. After the tragedy, however, Neil became very shut-in and reserved. Inevitably, Rush almost broke apart because Neil Peart was dealing with a lot and simply could not tour like he used to. Peart took a long break after the tragedy to make time for himself and grieve. He coped with everything through traveling on his motorcycle and writing several books. He eventually wrote his most famous book, Ghostwriter, after the death of his wife and daughter. Ghostwriter became one of many famous books Neil wrote, and is the most popular Neil Peart book. Lighthouse for Grieving Children summarizes the book by stating, Neil Peart suffered family losses so devastating that they left him a ghost, physically a man but with nothing inside, no hope, meaning, faith, or desire to keep living. However, around 3 years later, he is able to come to terms with his grief. In 2001, Rush was finally able to regroup because Neil was ready to pursue music again. They released 3 more studio albums, Vapor Trails 2002, Snakes and Arrows 2002, and Clockwork Angels 2012. The lyrics and storylines written into these albums are known for being exceedingly genius, but specifically in Clockwork Angels. The lyrics written by Peart created a vast and detailed story so fascinating that a famous book was written after the album, Clockwork Angels by Kevin J. Anderson. Some Rush fans discovered that the lyrics to Clockwork Angels in the band's last album, The Garden, contained lyrics which subtly portrayed his suffering and battle with disease. Peart was diagnosed with glioblastoma, an aggressive form of brain cancer, at the end of his life. Some of the song lyrics were, in this one of many possible worlds, all for the best, or for some bizarre test. It is what it is and whatever, time is still the infinite jest. The arrow flies when you dream, the hours tick away, the cells tick away. The watchmaker keeps to his schemes, the hours tick away, they tick away. Essentially, this song is describing that Peart knows it is only a matter of time before his disease will turn fatal. Tragic news broke out on Friday, January 10th, 2020, that Peart passed away from cancer. Apparently, he had been silently battling the disease for 3.5 years before he passed away. Peart was survived by his wife, Carrie, who he married after the passing of his first wife, and his daughter, Olivia. Many fans were shocked about the news, and people who knew him were very devastated to lose a person who was so important and impactful in the world of music. Neil Peart's last interview with the Info TV before he passed is his most famous one. In the interview, he seems very monotone and a bit more reserved and closed off in comparison to previous interviews. Peart was very well known for being a unique drummer in many ways. One of the main things he was known for was having a massive drum kit that he would play on at shows and concerts. He had over 40 drums on his drum kits, including china cymbals, crash cymbals, ride cymbals, splash cymbals, bells, and chimes. In Peart's Tom Sawyer solo, you hear that he uses many toms and doesn't just have all those drums for decoration. Yet, he strategically finds a way to make all of his drums embellish the music rather than showing off and playing only flashy fills. He was said to be great at balancing his playing style with the rest of the band. As I read Peart's book, Far and Near, Peart went into detail on the topic of how he sets up his drum set. He described that it would take a very long time for him to set up, and that it was just more beneficial to play with everything in the exact right place. If there wasn't something there that he needed, he would buy it and add it to his plethora of equipment. On the topic of Far and Near, Neil Peart also described in detail many of the diverse and beautiful countries he traveled as he was touring. Peart would journal about the views and many of his deep cognitive ideas and thoughts as he rode his motorcycle through North and South America, England, and Scotland. I found it extraordinarily fascinating when Peart would elaborate on what was going through his head, especially on the topic of politics and psychology. It is evident from Peart's writing and compositions that he had a brilliant mind, which is what led him to achieving so many great things and changing the world of music.